1 hour of r/nuclear revenge stories. Let's go. Steal my money, take my house, put me into debt. Now it's time for me to ruin your life. Repost from r/pro-revenge as people said it belongs here. My ex stole from me close to 90,000 euros which I saved up for 9 years, and when I took her to court, I lost due to lack of evidence. At the moment I felt destroyed and lost it all. She even sued me for emotional damages and I had to pay 55,000 euros. So I was forced to sell my house and take a big loan from the bank. I stayed at a friend and helped me find some good lawyers. And we just found an amazing one. In one day he helped me so much and even helped me get the info of who took money from my bank account. Something was wrong. 29th of June a transaction happened in my name. I never made it, I was not in the country at the time. Well, would you look at that? I was ready to get back into court when I found out that she bought my house. Well, I have a safe that I never told her about hidden in the bathroom behind the cabinet. Well, she ruined my life, why not ruin her even more? So I had an accomplice that helped me buy some drugs, worth about 400 euros and used a friend to hide it there. The safe has a 4-digit code, that being 0000, never got to change it to something else. And before taking her to court again I had that same friend who hid the drugs turn her in. It took about a week for the cops to receive a mandate to search the house. They found nothing in the first 2 hours, and they wouldn't if my friend forgot to leave the safe cover open. That 400 euro worth of drugs are equal to a 5,000 euro fine and 12 years of prison. Well, I'm not done yet. Court time again. I had my lawyer get the footage from when the money from the bank was transferred, and also I had a document showing that I was not in the country at the time. We also found out the account to which the money was sent to. The name was that of my ex. Well, look how the tables have just turned. My lawyer also demanded payment for emotional damage, all the money that was stolen, the house, and also money equivalent to 2 times the debt I had in the bank, which is equal to about 140,000 euros. The look on her face when everything came down crashing on her was totally worth it. And on top of the 12 years from drug possession she received an additional 25 years for theft and false testimony. Enjoy it, bitch. Wife cheated, so I tricked her into publicly admitting to having the affair and herpes. Okay, so I'm the coworker that encouraged him to post this. Unfortunately your account has to be 7 days old to post here, so I gifted him an alt I made for a joke about a month ago. This story is about 12 years old. I told it to one of my coworkers yesterday and he said I should share it to Reddit. Today he again nudged me, so here we are having drinks before the 4-day weekend and my writing is complete. So first time here and hi y'all. Sorry if there are typos. I included a TLDR at the end. In college, I met the woman who I thought was my one. We dated for about 2 years and had a big-ass wedding after a 10-month engagement. Her family was pretty well-to-do in a small southern town. We were both continuing our educations and I was also working to support us. I was pursuing a master's in engineering while she was finishing her doctorate in anthropology. Over the summer an opportunity came up for her to make some extra money going as an aide on a religious studies trip to Jamaica. I didn't hesitate when she asked me about it. I mean, she was going to get to visit Jamaica and get paid for it. I saw no downside other than missing her being at home for 6 weeks. Little did I know at the time, but she had been fucking the professor. He had hung out with us, smoked my weed and drank my fucking beer. I considered him a friend, who arranged the trip for a couple months, and it was a getaway for them to bang all over the island. I, clueless and happy, went about the weeks while she was gone taking extra shifts so I could match what she made in our account and surprise her. What a dipshit, right? One of the students from the trip actually seeked me out to clue me in. I didn't believe him until I started looking for evidence on my own. I broke down and checked her texts while she was sleeping and nothing was there. There were a few VMs, so I decided to listen, and there it was, a message from that giant asshole saying how exciting it was that I almost caught them. I opened up her laptop and hit the emails after that. It was piles and piles of shit, making fun of me for not knowing. fucking in our bed and laughing about it. There was so much and I was so heartbroken. Still too hurt to take any action, I was lost. I had no idea what to do, so I sat on it for a couple weeks and acted as normally as I could. I noticed everything now, I felt so stupid for not seeing it before. So many signs. One stuck out in particular. I noticed that our stash of homemade weed lube, if you've never tried it, I highly recommend giving it a go, was going down even though we weren't having sex. It was obvious they were also using the fruits of my labor to get off more effectively. This really pissed me off. Like unreasonably so, Hulk fucking mad. It finally all hit me. I was a goddamn joke to these assholes and they were using the lube I made and fucking in my bed. I didn't hurt anymore, I just wanted to make them hurt. So, while she was studying at the library, I made a new batch of lube. I put enough weed in it for it to smell like normal, but I also added some poison ivy from our backyard to the mixture, and after refilling the spray bottle we used for application, I waited. A few days go by and I'm working extra so I can be out of the house more, and bam, bait taken. That night after she goes to sleep my plan goes into action. I sneak her phone away and delete my contact, while replacing his phone number in his contact as mine. I go to bed but can't sleep because it feels like I'm 5 and tomorrow is Christmas. Dawn arrives and she's in the shower. I get a text. "I'm super itchy, are you okay? Now Lord, now is my time." Look, I thought it had cleared up but I guess I had a flare-up. "I'm sorry, but I've got herpes, and I guess you do now too." I heard this bitch squeak in the shower. I'm covering my mouth, damn near losing it. I went on to tell her that it was time to end things now, a new semester was about to start and I kind of have a little crush on another T/A. I wanted her mad, this is a woman that never got told no growing up, and never had to deal with rejection. Let alone from a balding dude in his 50s with herpes. When she got out of the shower it was obvious she had been crying but I could see the anger in her eyes. I could see how uncomfortable she was squirming at the table drinking coffee and mulling the situation over. Another little nudge is what she needed. The reply she got to her pages and pages of anger and sadness was, "Thanks for the good times, but can you keep this a secret between us? I don't want to ruin my chances with anyone else." She's flush with anger now, just seething. She gathered her keys and headed out the door without even saying goodbye. I knew where she was going. I booted up her laptop and set it to reformat, deleting her dissertation and any notes pertaining to it before following her to campus. I parked a few lots over and rush over to his office where I find her screaming at him for giving her herpes. There's lots of people there. Professors, aides, students, other faculty. I'm dying. He is beyond embarrassed and confused as fuck, she is ugly crying in front of her peers, I'm in heaven. I didn't even care that people were going to think I had herpes too. The fallout was apocalyptic in their department. He lost his job due to code of conduct at the university, we got divorced the following year. State law was we had to be separated for 1 full year before being granted a divorce. I got to keep most of the assets, primarily savings, and not a ton, but I worked for it. She never finished her doctorate and went on to be a perpetually pregnant housewife that sells Herbalife on Facebook, and he teaches high school now. It took a few years for it all to unfold, but watching it was glorious. I wanted my father to understand I wasn't coming. This is my first time posting. Sorry for the formatting. My parents divorced when I was in 1st grade. Not only did my dad disappear like Houdini, he stole my mother's ATM card to her personal account and drained her dry. My mother, being the saint she is, didn't even bat an eye. She still was cordial to him and never said a negative word about him. To me, my dad, albeit abandoning us, was still my hero. From 1st through 5th grade I had the usual abandoned by dad stories. Maybe 1 or 2 visits in a year and a 50 times of me waiting by the front window with my suitcase packed to go to his house and him never showing up. My mom through all of this was supportive and never said an ill word about him. So he still stayed my hero. When I was in 6th grade, my mother finally remarried, and my father, who only had a picture of me at 8 months old in his wallet, went ballistic. Did I mention he never paid child support? He would use his father's social, they had the same name, to get away with it. After my mom remarried, he let it be known that I was now my stepdad's responsibility. He cut off communication with me until I graduated high school. He didn't attend my graduation or send a card. What he did do was write me an email thanking God he no longer had to pay child support. He didn't anyway. What really broke me was his ruthless and brutal attack on my mother. Attacking her weight, looks, teeth, and blaming any perceived negative traits that I had on her. For the first time I realized what a cowardly piece of shit he was. I responded in kind. He told me I was no child of his and that I was a waste. After that I vowed that I would hurt him. 10 years later, my father, not interested in my wedding or my son, reached out to me. You see, he is a diabetic, and one of his organs were failing and he didn't have long. He's too far down on the list and he needed someone in our family to donate. Nuclear revenge activated. I answered his email. I met up with him and pretended that I didn't hate his guts. I went and got tested to see if I was a match. I was. Did the therapy and met with doctors and his therapist. We scheduled the surgery. The day of the surgery we meet at the hospital. I smiled in his face and let him know that I wouldn't be going through with the surgery. I watched the confusion line his face. I just wanted you to know that you're no father to me and you're a waste. I left the hospital and drive home. My mom was pretty annoyed with me that I took it that far. My father is dying and I will be attending the funeral out of spite. And I will let everyone know what a piece of shit he was. I beat the shit out of my sister and sent her to the hospital. I originally posted this story on another sub but was told it belongs here. I beat the shit out of my sister and sent her to the hospital. Trigger warning, this post talks about SA and our *ape. English is not my first language, so I apologize ahead of time. I 26M beat the shit out my sister, 23F, for sexually harassing my boyfriend, 25M. I can finally talk about this because all the legal proceedings have been dealt with. So I've been dating my boyfriend, Mark, for about 5 years. He's the best thing that has ever happened to me. He's kind, smart, understanding and absolutely beautiful. When we started dating he was a bit closed off and was afraid to initiate any form of intimacy. I at first thought it was because I was his first relationship and maybe he was nervous. 6 months into us dating he tells me that between the ages of 5 and 12 he was sexually assaulted and are *ped by his mother. His father left when he was around 4. It fucked him up in the head for a while, and when it got out his mother was arrested and he and his 2 older sisters were put in the custody of their grandparents who they lived with ever since. He was placed in intensive therapy and still goes to this day. He's come a long way and has healed a lot, but he still has some days when he gets really depressed and cries. Part of his therapy was exercising, so about 2 years ago he and I started doing some bodybuilding workouts. I toned up a lot, put 20 extra pounds of muscle on, and he toned up a bit. Because we've been dating for so long and have marriage in mind, he told my family, a less detailed version, and they welcomed him with love and support. Now for my sister, Sally. I've suspected she's had a bit of a crush on him. She'll flirt sometimes here and there, but he never reciprocated and usually ignored her. I've talked to her about it so many times, but she didn't listen. To make a long story short, I had gone out one Saturday afternoon with some friends to get some drinks and left Mark behind because he didn't feel like going. My sister had texted me prior to ask if she could borrow a few things from me, a sweatshirt, DSLR camera, and a third thing that doesn't come to mind at the moment. I said sure and to get it whenever. She went when I was out, unknowingly. When I came home I found my boyfriend on the ground crying his eyes out and my sister trying to calm him down. He was having a panic attack. It's never safe to touch him when he has an episode because he may act out violently due to his headspace. Her hands were all over him and he was trying to push her away. Her shirt was also on the ground and she was only in her bra. I tore her away and asked what the fuck she was doing. She said that she was trying on the sweatshirt when he walked in on her, freaked out and went into an episode. However, Mark through his tears said she tried to touch him. I asked my sister if it was true and she said no, but Mark again said she tried to touch him. We have cameras in the house and I pointed it out to my sister. Her face went white and I don't know what came over me, but I saw red. I can't remember much because I was so angry, but I beat the shit out of her. I can't even remember if I was the one who called 911 or her, though her beat up state. I do remember kind of snapping out of it because Mark was still going through his episode and I could him cry louder and I had to help him through it. It's all a haze. I broke my sister's nose, gave her a black eye and bruised her ribs. She was in the hospital for a few days. A friend set up my dad and he was nearly beaten to death. My grandfather got revenge on everyone involved. TLDR, my dad was nearly beaten to death and my grandfather went nuclear on everyone involved. This isn't my story, but it comes from my dad and other family members who witnessed it. Background. This all went down in the late 1970s when my dad was 17. The area he grew up in was in the UK and was a stereotypical working-class town. The part of town my family lived in was run down, full of poor families and had its fair share of crime, but it was close-knit and everyone knew everyone. This will be important later. Now my dad wasn't the most well-behaved kid, and he had hated being at school, but aside from a speeding ticket he had never been in trouble with the police. He was, and still is, a really talented musician and had a very active social life. For his 17th birthday one of his friends had bought him a leather jacket with a very specific logo on it. We'll call this friend Dave for future reference. According to my dad, it was a rare and quite expensive motorcycle jacket. He was extremely happy that Dave had got it for him. Dave had bought himself the same jacket a while before and it was a big surprise. My grandmother apparently joked that with the jackets on they looked like twins, and she wasn't far wrong. They had similar features, black hair, and were both well known for being kitted out in motorcycle gear. A few days after my dad's birthday, he was leaving work as a bartender in the town center at around 10 p.m. As he was getting close to where his bike was parked, a gang of 5 men approached him from behind. The last thing my dad remembers was being smacked over the head and passing out as he hit the floor. These men beat up my dad with bike chains and a crowbar, literally to within an inch of his life. Luckily 2 bouncers from a nearby pub had heard the commotion and rushed to help. The men ran off, the bouncers called the cops and my dad was taken to hospital. It turned out that Dave had quite a substantial gambling habit and owed a large amount of money to people who you really didn't want to owe money to. They had threatened Dave and told him that they would be looking for him to teach him a lesson. So Dave decided to set up my dad to take the beating instead of himself, or at least lessen his chances of taking it. He had bought my dad the same jacket because these guys knew that was what he wore when he rode. He then arranged for a guy he knew to find out when my dad left work and call up the loan sharks to let them know where Dave was. What a scumbag. The revenge. My grandfather and grandmother were obviously distraught about this whole thing. The first thought on my grandfather's mind was if my dad would survive. When that was answered, his second was how best to get revenge. Bit of background on my grandfather. He was a lifelong boxer and a career military man. He enlisted at the back end of WW2 at 17, stayed in the forces through Korea and then served in Malaya and Burma as a scout and sniper during the mid to late 1950s. He only reluctantly retired when my dad was little and worked as an engineer after his discharge. This guy was a certified badass even into his 50s, and although he wasn't the best husband or father at times, he could never stand by and watch his family get hurt. The first move my grandfather made was to call up every ex-service buddy, bouncer, pub landlord etc. that he knew, and even a few less than legit characters he knew from the pubs. In my town word traveled fast, and my grandfather was well liked and had a bit of a reputation, so it wasn't long before he had the names and addresses of the 5 men who had attacked my dad. Apparently these guys had been bragging about beating up a defenseless man from behind. These guys were career criminals with violent reputations, but my grandfather really didn't give a shit who or what they were. My grandfather then called up a few of the most dangerous, hardened guys he knew from the service. He explained to them what had happened and they were all happy to help. One night, the group kicked in the doors of each thug and beat them to a pulp, all 5 of them. They knew that if they hit one, the others would hear about it and run, so they hit all 5 of them in one night. My grandfather knew that no one would call the police in the area they lived in. Talking to the cops was a big no-no in that area back then, so there was little chance of being caught. All 5 guys ended up bloodied with broken bones, shattered teeth, and the requirement to be fed from a tube by the end of the night. One of them had to be put into a medically induced coma. Of course, the police interviewed all of them in hospital when they sufficiently recovered, but none of them talked, both out of fear of my grandfather and fear they would be labeled as rats, and nothing came of it. But my grandfather wasn't done there. My grandfather used his connections in the clubs and bars to start spreading rumors about why they had been beaten up. Soon it had gotten round that these 5 guys had fucked up, and had beaten up the wrong person. Not only that, but they had bragged about it and lied to whoever they worked for about it. Not only were they physically broken, but my grandfather ruined their credibility, so that when they got out no one, criminal or otherwise, wanted to be associated with them. Once this was all done, my grandfather turned his attention to Dave. He had specifically left Dave for last, knowing that he would shit himself knowing that my grandfather knew what he had done. My grandfather, however, was much more subtle in dealing with Dave, as he thought that a simple beating would be too good for him. He waited and asked around, and it turned out that Dave was not only a compulsive gambler but also had recently turned into a heavy drug addict as well. My grandfather found out who he was buying his drugs from, when he would usually buy and where. He had a buddy of his follow Dave when he went to buy his stuff, follow him to where he was living and let my grandfather know. My grandfather then called in an anonymous tip that there was a huge drug deal going on at the address and he thought he heard gunshots. He got 2 of his buddies to do the same. The police investigated, searched the house and caught Dave red-handed with boatloads of drugs in his home as well as counterfeit bills and a ton of other illegal stuff. Dave was charged, denied bail and ended up pleading guilty to all the charges laid against him. My dad could never remember his exact sentence, but it was definitely heavy, at least 15 years. To add to that, Dave owed a lot of money to a lot of people, and let's just say his time in prison was made much worse by this fact. My dad never spoke to him again, his parents disowned him, his girlfriend dumped him, he struggled to get a job with his record, and when he got out he had to move miles away as no one he knew wanted anything to do with him. My dad eventually recovered from his injuries, although you can still see various scars on his body from the beating he took. My grandfather never told anyone what he had done until my dad asked him about it when he got really ill in the early 1990s. Dave's life was ruined, and out of the 5 who attacked my dad, 3 ended up in prison later in life and 2 ended up dead due to crime. My grandfather passed away in the late 1990s, and although my dad and him had their issues, it could never be said he didn't look out for him when he needed it. Guy takes advantage of my little sister's disability, and I snapped. Context. My little sister, henceforth known as Holly, is mute. She can actually whisper a little, but it takes a lot of effort on her part. She's been mute ever since she was 5, when she lost her ability to speak in an accident. She's very smart, and she's a good-looking kid. At the time of these events, she was 16, and I was 21. Me and my sister lived together in an apartment, because my mother is a roamer who isn't well suited to take care of a teenager. She has our twin kid siblings, but not my sister and I. My dad is distant from the family, so helping my sister through high school falls to me. I work at a car parts shipping company, so I get paid just enough to get by. Because of our relatively poor living situation and my sister's inability to speak, she gets bullied at school. Generally it isn't much of a problem, but in the few months leading up to these events she was having increased problems with it. Build up. At the time, Holly was 16, but she was a sophomore in high school due to failing a year in middle school. She refuses to take special ed courses, now because they didn't help her at all, because she's good looking, and is older than most of her class. She gets attention from juniors and seniors. It's mostly negative attention, but there was one guy, who I will refer to as DIO from now on. He's the villain of this story, who treats her really nicely. He's a senior and at this time is 18. He repels bullies from her, because he's a tall, handsome, tough guy, and bullies don't want to mess with him. I don't interfere with them because my sister is visibly happy when she comes home from school and whenever she's around him. I didn't let them hang out alone together, but supervised them hanging out a few times. Anyway, King Crimson a few months, and she stops coming home happy. She isn't hanging out with him anymore either, and although I ask her multiple times, she won't tell me anything about it. I confront him about it, and he evades the topic. At this point I'm suspicious, but I don't know what to be suspicious of. Researching. I'm getting more and more worried about Holly, so I go to her counselor and assistant principal to ask about her activities at school. From what I learn, she still spends all her free time near Dio at school. I find this strange, since she doesn't seem happy anymore. This is where the illegal stuff starts. A few days later, I invite Holly and Dio on a dinner night to Olive Garden. No one can resist Olive Garden. While we're there I do two things that are completely illegal. One, I steal his phone, which I've seen the password to, and two, I read his texts and emails. Anything I can to find out what's happened between them. I don't find what I'm looking for, but I do find out that he drinks and smokes weed with his friends on weekends. This will be relevant later. A few days later I find his phone in the laundry, and say it must have ended up in one of our coats on accident. I know for a fact he got it back, because he called me to thank me for having Holly return it. I still didn't have what I was looking for, so I went back to the school, and used his previous texts as grounds to check CCTV for any suspicious activity. There wasn't anything suspicious by school standards, but there was something that caught my eye. It was my sister, going to the central bathroom in the school, and him going to the boys' room of the same bathroom about a minute later. The bathrooms are separated by a wall, but there's a janitorial closet that opens into both bathrooms and is completely in the blind zone of anyone walking into the bathrooms, let alone the CCTV cameras. At this point, I began to suspect that something was happening between them in that bathroom. It was the only one with a closet like that, and if my memory served me, the closet didn't have a proper lock. It just locked from the outside on both sides. Boiling point. Now that I suspected something, I confronted Holly about it. She broke down crying, and after 15 minutes of consoling, she shakily signed to me something that made my blood boil. Apparently, it was far worse than I expected. I had thought they were going in there and doing drugs or something, since Dio was the kind of guy who would pull that kind of thing. As it turns out, according to Holly, he brought her in there one day, closed the doors, held her down, and raped her. He told her that he would know if she told anyone, and he would hurt her if she did. Because she physically could not scream for help, or make any kind of loud noise for that matter, he got away with it. And the worst part is, he was threatening her into meeting him there every couple of days and doing that to her. I was livid. My first instinct was to call the police, but I realized that there was no evidence except the testimony of a mute girl. I wouldn't be satisfied with police intervention anyway. The first thing I did was call Holly in for a week from school. Family emergency can get them a week of excused absences easily. The next thing I did was find out where he lived. After that, I planned the most brutal revenge I could think of. Highly illegal revenge. My first step was to break into his house. It turns out his parents go out a lot, and he leaves to smoke and drink with his friends. I knew from reading his texts that there was a spare key on top of the porch light in the backyard. That Saturday, I scoped out the place, and waited for everyone to leave. I then began phase 1 of my revenge. I went into his house through the back door, and found his room. I smashed his PC, stole his wallet, and pissed on his bed. Then I poorly hid 2 small bags of weed in his house. I have a friend who grows. Finally, to hide the fact that it was targeted, I tossed up the rest of the house, but didn't take anything. I then went to a Starbucks and used the Wi-Fi and DIO's debit card, he didn't have credit, to purchase a bunch of sex toys in his name and send them to his house. I then left his wallet sitting near a homeless man sleeping on a park bench. Next, I contacted his parents and told them I had seen their son drinking and smoking with a group of teenagers. They were furious, which leads me to believe that wasn't the first time something like that had happened. Finally, I went to the back road he walked on his way home from his drinking parties, which I had found out in a text from one of his friends. I waited for 2 hours in some bushes for him to walk by, and then, wearing sunglasses and a hoodie, jumped him. I demanded his money and phone, although I knew he didn't have his wallet. I kept one hand in my hoodie pocket, pointing it like I had a gun, which he believed. He handed over his phone and ran away. I then finished up my plan by using his phone, which I still had the password to send an email to the school from his school email, confessing to raping my sister in the janitorial closet multiple times, as well as possessing drugs on school grounds and drinking alcohol when he was underage. Then I snapped his phone on my knee and went home. Aftermath. My sister went back to school the following Monday, armed with a can of mace I bought her. DIO wasn't at school, and she was called in by her counselor. She confessed, and he was charged with rape, underage drinking, and illegal drug possession. On top of that, his parents completely disowned him, and he was expelled from the school. Sadly, this story doesn't have a completely happy end. This whole ordeal sent Holly into a downward spiral. Her grades fell behind, and she barely smiled. In March of 2018, she attempted suicide by cutting herself, and it was pure luck that I found her in time. She's getting better now, but the emotional trauma will probably affect her for life. I pray to whatever cruel gods are out there that he gets a taste of his own medicine in prison.